With Paper Mario the Origami King releasing and kind of bringing partners back, it made me wonder what the worst and best partners are in the entire series. I'll be including the partners from Paper Mario 64 in the Thousand Year Door, since you can actually control them in battle. This will be based off how useful they are in combat, and not so much their character designs or personality. Before we begin, I just want to give a heads up that my gameplay uses files that have maxed out stats. The purpose of that is to be able to more easily show off what each partner's moves are. But with all that said, let's get her ranked. 15. Miss Mouse. The Squeak Thief is a bit of a nuisance at the beginning of the Thousand Year Door, but she ends up joining your team later down the line. And honestly, she doesn't have much going for her. Her first attack is Love Slap, which is okay, but most partners have basic attacks. It's her special moves that are an issue. Smooch heals 10 HP for Mario, but it also takes 10 FP to use once, which is just absurd. Miss Mouse also has Tease, which can make enemies dizzy, but that's kind of pointless when the dizzy dial exists. There's also Kiss Thief for stealing items from enemies, but how often is that really going to be useful? 14. Madame Flurrie. Compared to the other partners, Flurrie really stands out among the others design-wise. But does that make her a useful fighter? Let's look into her arsenal. Body Slam hits a single enemy, which is fine. Gale Force can blow all the enemies out of battle, but it's not guaranteed to work. She's also got Lip Lock, which drains enemies' HP to add to her own. Lip Lock also pierces defense as a bonus. And lastly, there's Dodgy Fog, which increases the dodge rate to 50%. That's also nice, but you could just buy the Repel Cape, which does the exact same thing. So Flurrie's best move is probably Gale Force, but it's only good to have in very specific situations. 13. Lakilester. Wait, how do you even say that? Is it Lackey or Lackeye? I don't know. Two of his attacks involve throwing Spinies. The first one, Spiny Flip, throws a Spiny Egg at one enemy. Spiny Surge throws a lot of eggs at every enemy. What's great about this is the amount of coverage Lakilester can provide in one turn. Cloud 9 makes a cloud that increases Mario's evasion rate. This may sound great, but the Close Call, Pretty Lucky, and Lucky Day badges all do the exact same thing. The big move, however, is Hurricane, and similar to Flurrie's Gale Force, Hurricane blows enemies off the battlefield. It's more consistent than Gale Force, but sadly you don't get star points. Lakilester is also the last partner you unlock. He may have been ranked a little higher if he wasn't unlocked so late into the game. 12. Goombario. Our first partner is a young lad just looking for an adventure. As a beginning partner, he generally doesn't offer very much. He has Head Bonk, which headbutts a single enemy. One of the more unique moves is Tattle, which has the unique attribute of uncovering an enemy's description and stats. Charge powers up Goombario's attack, and Multi-Bonk is where things get interesting. You can bounce on enemies multiple times until you miss an action command. This can be really beneficial if you're good at timing your attacks, and if you have Power Plus equipped, it just makes you even stronger for very little FP usage. That's really all he has though, with no defense or spread options. 11. Bombette. If there's one thing I can say about this pink fella, is that she hits really, really hard. Which makes sense because she's a bomb after all. Body Slam hits one enemy like most attacks do. Bomb is similar to Body Slam, but does way more damage to one enemy. Power Bomb damages all ground enemies, while Mega Bomb damages all enemies. In terms of spreading out attacks, Bombette is one of the best to do that. The big issue here is these powerful attacks use a lot of FP. Power Bomb chokes through 6 FP and Mega Bomb 8. Then of course she can't be used defensively, so that doesn't help much either. 10. Admiral Bobbery. A bomb with a mustache and a sailor's hat. That's honestly pretty slick. And his move pool is fairly solid as well, at least in some aspects. He's also got the most HP, so he'll likely last longer than any other partner. His first move is Bomb, which attacks a single enemy. Bomb Squad brings out 3 time bombs that explode after one turn. Hold Fast basically counters enemy attacks, so Bobbery will return half of the damage that directly attacks them. You can also stack the Spite Pouch and return postage badges, and this will counter all the damage instead of half. The final attack is Bombette, which does an insane amount of damage to all enemies. The problem with that, though, is it takes 9 FP to use, which is pretty significant. Bobbery and Bombette are fairly similar, but Bobbery gets the slight edge because of his hold fast attack. 9. Koops. I sure hope he changes that band-aid on his nose every once in a while. That'll get dirty real quick. So my dude, vibing in the hoodie, specializes in shell attacks in a multitude of ways. Koop's Shell Toss hits single enemies on the ground. The Power Shell does the same thing, but it plows through every ground enemy. Shell Shield protects Mario by encasing him inside of a massive shell. Depending on your timing, the shell can withstand 2 to 8 HP. Finally, there's Shell Slam, which hits all ground enemies and destroys their defenses. The only downside is he can't do really really anything against air enemies, which could be bad in some circumstances. 8. Kooper. That is the perfect name for a Koopa, so props to Nintendo for that. As for his ability to fight, he's middle of the road. His shell toss move hits one enemy. The power shell attacks all grounded enemies, just like Koop's power shell. Funny how they have the exact same name. Dizzy shell is basically the power shell, but it makes the enemies dizzy, which is a nice touch for only 1 extra FP. Then there's the fire shell that's the strongest attack and can kill dry bones in 1 hit. So all in all, Kooper is basically Koop's but slightly more useful. 7. Paracarry. Of the 3 Koopa partners, this one is slightly better than the other 2. Skydive kicks one enemy while in the air, but the big advantage is that he can hit enemies on the ceiling. Shell Shot has Paracarry going into a shell and shooting himself at an enemy. Next is Airlift, which is a bit of an oddball. With Airlift, Paracarry removes an enemy from the battlefield, but this doesn't work if the enemy has spikes or is on fire, so while it's an interesting concept, it's only practical at certain points. Air Raid is pretty dope though. Paracarry flies around the screen dealing damage to every enemy. Air Raid uses 6 FP, but again, there's badges to help mitigate that problem. The big downsides here is just Airlift the move, and that there's no defensive moves like Koop's Shell Shield. But Koops and Kooper are limited to attacking ground enemies only, while Paracarry has no such limit. 6. Vivian. If you need someone to heat up the battle, this is your best bet, as lots of Vivian's moves cause burn damage. Shade Fist is a punch that can set burnable enemies on fire. Veil is really interesting because it hides Mario in a shadow, therefore bypassing enemy attacks. While this is obviously great for defense reasons, Vivian has to recharge and can't do anything for the next turn. Fiery Jinx is fantastic because it deals fire damage on all enemies as well as piercing defense and burning them. Lastly, there's Infatuate, in which Vivian blows a kiss and all enemies become confused. This is fairly useful because it works on multiple enemies at once. 5. Sushie. This large fish is pretty crazy. The top 5 partners very much deserve the spots they're in. Belly Flop is an attack where Sushie hops on one enemy. Squirt shoots water at one enemy, and it's also a water type move. Water Block gives Mario higher defense, which is of course a huge plus. Then there's Tidal Wave, practically the most powerful move in Paper Mario. It's got the capabilities of knocking out every enemy on screen, though the lag on Virtual Console is pretty terrible. Sushie has great attack power and can beef up Mario's defense. What a good fishy. 4. Lady Bo. This may be my favorite sassy ghost ever, and she just so happens to be one of the best partners in combat. With Smack, Bo will hit an enemy between 4 to 6 times depending on the rank. This is great for a 0 FP move, but it's also useless against an enemy with defense on. Out of Sight makes Mario and Bo invulnerable to attacks for 1 turn, so it's similar to Vine's Veil. Spook can potentially scare players off the battlefield, and Fan Smack is a much stronger version of Smack. Bo hits a player with a fan and can do anywhere from 2 to 10 damage. That's pretty crazy for how cheap Fan Smack is, and that's before including badges that can increase attack power. 3. Watt. A bolt of electricity with a pacifier. I don't understand how anybody comes up with these ideas. For the amount of things Watt can do, she's fairly conservative with the FP. Electro Dash attacks one enemy with an electric shock. As a bonus, this bypasses any defense an enemy may have. Then there's Power Shock, which paralyzes a single enemy. Turbocharge charges up Mario's attack power, and Mega Shock paralyzes all enemies. The most FP you'll ever use is 5, which is pretty low considering the amount of versatility Watt has. 2. Goombella. You might be really confused why Goombella is so high up while Goombario is so low. Let's get to that in a second, but first let's cover her bases. Goombella has Head Bonk, which hits a single enemy. Tattle works exactly like it did in the first Paper Mario game, and Multi Bonk lets you hit multiple enemies until you miss the action command. Things get spicy with Rally Wink. Goombella winks at the crowd, and Mario gets a second turn. This might not sound like much, but the amount of options you gain from being able to use Mario twice is truly exponential. You could attack again, take a moment to heal, use an item. Really, the possibilities are endless. 1. Mini-Yoshi. Are you even surprised that Mario's best pal snuck up to the top spot? This is the only partner that has alternate colors based on how long it takes for his egg to join Mario's party. Yoshi's first move is a ground pound, where he bounces off a single enemy. Then there's Gulp, where Yoshi eats an enemy and spits them back out. He can even eat spiked enemies without getting hurt. Mini Egg is a ridiculously good attack that somehow only takes 3 FP. Yoshi throws 3 to 4 eggs, which will then shrink the enemies and deal damage. And we're not even done yet. His last attack is Stampede, where a herd of Yoshi come in to attack all the enemies. It's a great nod to Smash Bros. Bailey's intro, and it's extremely powerful. I guess you could say he doesn't have much for defensive options, but his attacking move pool is so over the top compared to most characters that he has to be number 1. As someone that isn't super familiar with Paper Mario, it was fun to go back and learn about which partners are the best to use. A big shout out to the Paper Mario Club and the RNG Source Discord servers for help on this video. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Until next time.